Um, when I was there, I had I used to love oysters, and where I was at a place called Hiro. We used to send one of the local fishermen out to buy oysters, and we'd get quite a few oysters. Suppose when they're out of their shells, and there'd be enough oysters to fill. Let's see, if you took the top of a 2 litre milk jar, and then use that as a measure, you'd actually get 2 litres of oysters, shelled oysters, in the thing, and it used to cost us 60 cents. So we loved oysters. Very nice. However, when I went to Hiroshima, I thought I'll pursue my habit and have some oysters. Well, I had the Hiroshima oysters, and they turned out to be not so good as they tasted all right, but not so good as the ones we had at Hero, which is a few miles away. So after a while, I developed a rash around the groin area, and finished up with a rash from the waist to the knees. And then I got a high temperature and diarrhea and things like that. So they trotted me off to the British General Hospital at Cyril, and I spent about eight or 9 weeks there recovering from this. And they put it down eventually as glandular fever, because I don't think they wanted to talk too much about radiation in those days, although they didn't probably know much about it anyway. So that was quite a thing. And later on, when I had an accident, when I broke my tibia, fibula and femur in an accident, a car accident, it took me 3 years before the bones were healed up and I was able to walk without walking sticks or crutches or things like that, or a walking caliper. So it was quite a while for it to join, and it took about 8 or 9 months for the tib and fib to join up, and they thought they had the femur joined up, but it had a Steinman's pin and a bowl of syrup in it, and they took the Steinman's pin out, and then of course it broke again, so they had to start all over again. So that was a rather arduous time actually. But that was in Concord in Sydney, and then later on at Heidelberg, where they transferred me. They got an excuse and said, let's transfer him to Heidelberg, because in Concord they only had army doctors who left a lot to be desired, and in Heidelberg in Sydney they had the use of specialists. So as soon as the specialist saw my leg, he said, oh, we don't need a bone graft, it's already healed up. So that's not what the people in Sydney said. Anyway, so I didn't have to have a bone graft operation for my ankle. So that pressed on for a while. It had repercussions later, of course. I've had to wear elastic stockings for quite a while, and so on and so on. Well, enough of that. What else can I tell? Oh yes, the condition of Hiroshima itself. Now, the Imperial Japanese headquarters in Hiroshima, which is a building which has been preserved, it was totally wrecked, except the steel frame. It was a reinforced bomb-proof building, and the steel frame was still there, but the concrete had been mostly gone, and it's just like a steel frame, like a scaffolding or a steel frame structure, without any concrete, reinforcing concrete around it. Anyway, that was the Imperial Japanese headquarters. Now the Hiroshima Hospital had some Corinthian columns to the entrance of the hospital. There were about 6 of them to make it look quite smart when you went there. And when the bomb went off, these 6 Corinthian columns, which were quite solid, were driven straight down into the ground by 6 feet, so that they were just like nails with somebody hammering on the top of them. Went boom, and there they were, 6 feet shorter, or 6 feet less above ground than they had before. And that was they just fall straight down. There were about 5,000 Japanese troops vaporised on the parade ground on this particular day. You couldn't even find their boots. There was nothing left of them. They just turned into gas. That was that. And then, what else can I tell you about Hiroshima? Oh, I told you about the lady with the silhouetted lady, and the ashtrays, and the memorial. Yeah, I think that's about all we can talk about Hiroshima. It's a dismal place. It was then. There's a lot of empty ground, of course, where the whole streets were just levelled flat. There's nothing left whatsoever. Um, when the emperor made a speech saying that the war was over, when it was over, after a couple of days after they'd bombed Nagasaki, and which was after Hiroshima, and then so the war was over, and the emperor made a speech. Now the interesting part about this was that the Japanese couldn't understand what he was talking about, because he spoke an entirely different language to the language of the person in the street. So they heard this speech from the emperor, and they all thought they'd won, until it had to be explained later that they'd lost. And quite a few of them in the initial stages clapped and cheered and said how wonderful it is. And then they found out that they're on the receiving side and not the giving side. Now, Japan came into the war quite early in the piece, when they invaded Manchuria and then moved down into China. And in the process of conquering parts of China, they got to a place called Nanking. Now in Nanking, there was a great massacre of men, women and children, where the soldiers would throw the children up in the air and catch them on the end of a bayonet, and use this for bayonet practice. And then they would also kill men and women for bayonet practice too, to get their troops used to the sight of blood and used to the idea of killing somebody. So it's a thing like a few Chinese to practice on. So that's not meant as a joke actually. Anyway, they did that, and there was a terrible massacre at Nanking. Now there was an American missionary in Nanking who got about 30 to 35 minutes of film. He rolled on this, and so have a look. Oh no, I'm still going. He got this 35 minutes of film on this, and he smuggled it out of China with great personal risk. And the Allies got hold of this movie of the Rape of Nanking, and we got it. We got it on. We got it. We drew it out of the film library at where we were, and as I was a licensed projectionist at the time, I showed this to the troops, and he said, "What a good idea! We'll show it to the Japanese." So we invited all the Japanese people who had working for us around there, and we started off with the Bugs Bunny and a few other things like that, and then we showed them the Rape of Nanking. Well, they refused to believe it. They said our troops would never do things like that, and they were quite convinced it was a doctored propaganda film, that they would never ever do things like that. So the people in Japan didn't know what was going on. They were totally impervious to the situation, and so that was an interesting exercise to find out just exactly what they knew and what they didn't know. Well, I think that's about all for now. I'm going to switch off and think of something else to say.